Yeah, money. Get started. We begin with chapter 1, the introduction. Whatever the title is, basic economics. Chapter 1 from small book. I should begin because this is 101 course. I'm going to assume that you know right about economics, and I'll start from the very term economics. Analyzing it etymologically, which means where does it come from? What is the meaning? What is the original meaning? How did it evolve over time? So on. Any ideas from which language the term economics originates? It's a derivative of the Greek, ancient Greek word. Oikos meant in ancient Greek like a household. And nomia, if nomos is a law or the rule, it could be a science, for example, like astronomy is the same. What is there? Astronomy is a science about stars. So the word is, as far as I know, met for the first time in Aristotle's book, Politics. Aristotle, you know who the guy is. Greek philosopher. Sometimes say half jokingly that Aristotle invented everything that exists. That's all, meaning almost all of the sciences as we know them nowadays were either founded or significantly contributed by Aristotle. I mean, ethics, aesthetic, logic, Aristotelian logic. If you ever studied logic in high school or university, deduction, induction, and so on, that's Aristotelian science. One of them is politics. And he wrote a book, Politics, which begins with an analysis of the household management. How people manage their families and household property, how they're organized their, what we would call nowadays economic life, this micro level. So oikonomia is the term that Aristotle uses. Oikonomia means household management. The economics is an anglicized version of the Greek oikonomia. Because household nomia be science or wisdom or art, depending how you want. Science about household management. And then, since Aristotle is very influential, this term came to be adopted by the medieval Christian scholastic philosophy. And from there, it was bequeathed to us in modern times, and everybody uses this term in all major Indo-European languages: French, Russian, Slavic, Germanic languages, economics. With one notable exception of German. Separate terms for all major scientific terms, but apart from this significant exception of German, all other languages use economics. Now, that's a piece of history about how the term came to be. The meaning of the term economics changed dramatically from ancient times. Okay. Aristotle founded economic science in a bad way. Aristotle is responsible for many of the misconceptions about economics that we have nowadays. And one of them, one of the primary ones, is that economics is about consciously organizing resources that are given to one person, managing given resources for given ends, household management. That's what economics is all about. You have your family estate, and economics is about how are you going to organize resources that you have to improve your economic condition. So in this, economy or economics is associated with conscious or deliberate planning and organization of resources in one sense. That's how Aristotle understood meaning. Why this might be a problem? If you want to analyze, to understand the modern economic system, why is this an insufficient or problematic view of economics? Who is deciding in our modern economy how much steel is going to be produced? Is there any one person who makes this decision? Who's making that decision?
Say the president.
President? Does president decide how many laptops are going to be produced in the next 6 months? Who decides? The market. What is the market? Okay. So you see, Aristotle's definition of economics is a non-market definition. It ignores the market. Now the problem is, what is the market? So it's not that there is one person, like a president or a vice president or the House Speaker or some powerful businessman who decides, you know, comrades, we're going to produce 264,321 laptops next year and a half. So it's not, the market system is not a system in which somebody manages consciously or deliberately what is going to be made, how much, who is going to buy what, and in which quantity. Let's try and define our market. How markets work. Let's talk about it. Supply and demand. What else can you say about it? How supply and demand are expressed? How people obtain whatever they want. The function of market economy. What is the function of the economy? The economic system. What is the goal?
Money.
Money. Making money.
Trading goods.
Okay. But what is the final goal? People trade goods. Why do you trade goods? Why do you pay a certain amount of money for a cup of coffee?
Give people what they want.
Consumption of useful consumer goods that people want. Obtaining consumer goods. And consumer goods are necessary in order to improve the quality of life. The market provides consumer goods. What is the mechanism to which production and exchange of consumer goods is carried out? What is the mechanism? How we obtain consumer goods? How you obtain money? What is the mechanism? Money is an instrument. What is the mechanism?
Would you like retail stores?
Yeah, the exchange, buying and selling. So market is associated with the concept of exchange, which means buying and selling. And buying and selling exchange is happening Because we have something called market prices. Prices of every item that we exchange. Now, 90% of economics is trying to understand market prices, how market prices are formed, which are the forces involved, supply and demand. How can we analyze supply and demand? What the supply and demand are based on? So a large chunk of economic science is not about managing given stuff that you have. Aristotle understood economics. Once you have food, shelter, clothing, once you have some resources, how are you going to distribute those resources to meet your needs that you have right now? But modern economics is not only about exercising command over a given pool of resources, it's actually how resources come to be, how resources are produced in exchange. So he ignored the market mechanism. So that's a change in the meaning. Market economy is not management of a given set of resources that we have that are somehow here. It's actually a science about how resources are produced, exchanged, and consumed. And for the most part, it's a science about market prices. So see, there is one American economist who told a story about, it is a true story. During the Nixon administration, when America renewed the relationship with the communist China. And the first economic delegation from communist China came to the United States. And you know, the difference between socialism and capitalism, what is the main difference? I'm introducing additional terms here. Capitalism and socialism, what is the main difference in these two economic systems?
Who controls the market?
Controls. Is there a market in socialism?
Not really. I mean, the government controls it.
Yeah, the government controls. There is a socialism entails government ownership and operation of the means of production, which means factories, tools, machines, everything is government's ownership. Mines, natural resources, everything is hands of government. Decisions about what is to be produced and in which quantity are made by the government bodies. So socialism is associated with the concept of central planning, central economic planning. It is not the consumers and consumer demand that determines what is going to be produced and in which quantity. It's actually a decision of a body of government bureaucrats. They had something called 5 years plans. You know, the communist, the Central Committee of the Communist Party decides, appoints experts, and they decide in the next 5 years, comrades, we're going to produce such and such quantity of steel, such and such quantity of coal, such and such quantity of this or that. How many automobiles? All of that is determined by the government, and then people are employed to fulfill the government plan. So there is a commissar who is in charge of how much steel and aluminum is going to be. Who makes those decisions in America? The market economy. Say nobody and everybody, which means people who buy or refrain from buying steel or aluminum. If there is a money offered for steel will be produced. If there is a demand for something, that something will be produced. So when you brush your teeth with the toothpaste that you bought 3 days ago, actually you're directly influencing what some multinational corporation is going to be produced next weeks. So you're influencing their profitability. And you buy Thomas Sowell's book or the other book, you're increasing demand. You're determining how many Thomas Sowell's textbooks are going to be sold in America. You contribute to that decision. You do not make the decision yourself because many other people will be buying the book, but you contribute on the margin a little bit to that. How many of you? 20 people will have bought the book. You increase the demand for the book by 20 units. So there is thousands and millions of people who make decisions about what is going to be produced and how much. Everybody who buys, when you buy an automobile, you increase the demand not only for automobiles, you increase demand for aluminum, for steel, for the labor of people who use all resources that come into producing automobiles. You increase the demand for those resources. So you, on the margin, decide how much steel is going to be used, how many automobiles are going to be. Okay, so that's the difference. In America, in a market economy, all consumers together make decisions. Because sometimes people talk about the market as a democratic system in which we vote with our dollars. Whenever you buy a cup of coffee, you vote for that particular producer. You offer them like a $3 vote of your democratic vote. You're a producer, you get more dollar votes, you're wealthy. But nobody, there is not one central party, there is not one person who is going to decide how many Thomas Sowell's textbooks are going to be sold in the next 6 months. That will be determined by how many people will decide to buy Thomas Sowell. And that is determined in turn by their own private preferences, private values, private opinions that nobody can control in free society. Okay, so that's the difference. Whereas in a communism, in a strict socialist central planning body, there is one group of people who decide how much steel is going to be produced. Thomas Sowell's books would be banned because he teaches this thing that is not welcome to socialism, but some other books will be printed and sold. How many of them? It will be determined by the Department of Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Education. So now going back to this story, you know, the communist commissar from China who was in charge of deciding how much steel is going to be produced, he came to America and wanted to talk to his American counterpart. He asked President Nixon, who is in charge of steel and aluminum in your government. Nobody. And he was flabbergasted. How come that nobody is in charge of such an important issue, like a strategic product, like steel, and you don't have anyone who controls how much steel is going to be. So this is the reason why I'm going on and on about this problem, this distinction between capitalism, which is dominated by market, and socialism dominated by central planning, is that economic science will be and is very counterintuitive, which means strange. It means that we have market economic system. When you look at it, from one standpoint, looks like an intelligently designed mechanism. When you think of it for a moment, just think about it. You get up in the morning and you want to buy a cart of milk, and you go to the store and you are 100% sure that you're going to find whatever you need. You want to buy anything else, you go to Amazon and you buy the exact same book and the edition that you need right now. And you're very annoyed and disappointed if you cannot find quickly, promptly, whatever you want to buy. On the other hand, there is nobody who gives a damn about you or me as persons. People who provide us with goods and services, people who make sure that we have everything we want to buy every single day. They don't know us, they don't care about us, they may hate us if they knew us, and still they provide us with everything we need. So this is something that is deeply disturbing and strange and counterintuitive. Why? Because we are used to thinking about intelligent mechanisms, about something that makes sense, as being designed and controlled by somebody. This scientific, technological notion of rationality, a machine, like a whatever, airplane engine, does a job because somebody designed it, having in mind certain scientific principles, and the machine works. So we think of rationality or something being rational or intelligent almost always is something that is being designed and controlled by someone. And here you have apparently very finely tuned and intelligent mechanism, market prices, a market system that for everything we know is not designed and nobody is controlling. There is nobody home. Who decides about what is going to be produced and how much? Nobody and everybody. Millions of people. The profound puzzle that economic science deals with is how come that millions of people and billions of people in the global economy who don't know anything about each other, that they, by their selfish decisions to buy, sell, produce, exchange, create this system that functions so smoothly and provides enough goods and services to everyone. That's something that we will have to build in our understanding of economics. What is the key? What is the secret of this? You can call it a miracle. Isn't it a miracle? What is the likelihood? If you start from the notion that everything that is rational and good has to be caused by somebody. Somebody has to take care of or to create a rational result. What is the likelihood that every one of us will be able to buy exactly what we need every single day? It's infinitesimal. It's almost zero. So if you don't study economics, the most basic facts of life have to look as a miracle. The fact that you can buy milk every single day is a miracle because nobody asks you whether you want to. Nobody asks you whether you need Thomas Salt. And then you can find them wherever you want. People were ready for a price to provide it. Now the secret of all that seeming here, you see, a disturbing thing about economics is that we usually think of miracles as something that is extraordinary, something that requires explanation because it doesn't fit our everyday experience. Miracles are extraordinary events. And here, the most mundane, the most everyday facts of life seem, when you think of them, as miraculous. And the only way to understand why they are not miraculous is actually to study economics, to study price theory. To study how actually all those millions of people cooperate together. So we cooperate together. When somebody is cutting down a tree in British Columbia or Washington State right now, that person is cooperating with the parents of children who is going to start their school in 2 or 3 months who need pencils. That person cooperates with them without knowing anything about them. How is that? To cut down the tree. The wood is then processed in a series of stages until wooden pencil is made. Before buying and selling stuff, production process goes from cutting down the tree to making the pencil. And people who make chainsaws. They cooperate with the parents of the kids who is going to go to school. Because you cannot cut down the tree without a chainsaw. To make a chainsaw, you need steel. So people who make steel also cooperate with the buyers of pencils. Miners in iron ore cooperate with parents of the because they dig iron ore that is necessary to make steel, that is necessary to make a chainsaw. What about the paint? Wooden pencil needs a paint. Somebody's making this paint. Maybe in another country. This rubber eraser is made out of material that is produced mostly in Asia. Those people are also cooperating unknowingly with the parents of children in North Dakota who are going to buy a pencil. So see, when you analyze the production process of anything, don't get me started about the airplanes. How many people could cooperate in making a single airplane without knowing what they're doing? Aluminum, synthetic materials, plastic. Somebody's making a plastic that is going to be used to insulate electrical wires in airplanes in China or India. Somebody's making some component part of the engine without knowing what they're doing. Somebody's making rubber for the landing gear in the airplane. Somebody is working on the pieces of electronics that could be used for other purposes apart from the airplane. There's thousands and millions of people cooperating every day in making stuff, eventually creating an intelligence result. And you see an airplane, see, wow, what a miracle of human ingenuity. This is airplane. And yet there is nobody who knows how to make an airplane. There is not one single person who knows how to make it. And moreover, not only the airplane, there is not a single person who knows how to make a pencil. There is a story, there is a paper, article written 50, 60 years ago, and I'm saying there is nobody who knows how to make a pencil. That doesn't mean that pencils don't get made all the time. It means only that pencils get made by thousands of people cooperating unknowingly together through the market price system, create a pencil. But there is not one single person who knows how to make a pencil. There is one guy. I hope I can find this. I'll post it on Canvas for you to see. There is one guy, English journalist, who decided to make a toaster from scratch. You can just Google how I made a toaster from scratch. He said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make a toaster myself. I'm gonna make every single component that is necessary for a toaster myself without anyone else's cooperation. And he devoted a year of his life to making a toaster. I'm not gonna spoil your enjoyment of the video. I'm just going to tell you that he studied all the textbooks, how you melt copper, how you insulate the copper wires, how you make a plastic. So he wanted to make all component parts of a single toaster that you can buy for $5 in a store. And he worked for 1 year. He went to one mine to dig copper, and then he used the copper ore, the raw copper, to melt it into copper that is useful for electrical production. He tried to make plastic himself and everything else, and eventually he failed. The toaster worked for about 2 seconds, melted. So one man, highly intelligent man, who devoted many thousands of hours of his work over a period of 1 year, couldn't make something as mundane and simple that we take for granted, like an electrical toaster that you can buy for $5 store. So that tells you that many things that you take for granted are not to be taken for granted. The presence of milk and coffee and toasters and pencils is not of the same kind as the presence of the trees and rivers and natural phenomena. They are not natural phenomena. They're a product of human cooperation in a very complicated system of social cooperation driven by market prices. Now, the secret of all of this is actually how all this system of cooperation is possible. There are two things. The first thing is specialization, division of labor. I do one thing, you do another thing, somebody else does the third thing. We divide up, we slice up, divide up the task of making a pencil into 5, 6, 10, 20 discrete tasks. That's way more productive. than if I try to myself a toast. That's one of the secrets, one of the explanations of this miracle. But the core of all it is the market prices. How we exchange stuff, how we buy and sell the component parts. That's the market prices. So 70%, let's say that we have 100% of market transactions in an economy, all buying and selling that is going on. 70% of that is people buying and selling stuff that is not the final consumer good. That means producer of different things, trading, exchanging intermediate goods, as we say, component parts that are going to be used to produce. So, for example, buying and selling steel and wood, or plastic, or component parts of machinery, or buying labor from somebody who's going to work to make it. 70% of all market transactions are market transactions of that kind. Not selling the final good to the consumer, but buying and selling intermediate goods among producers. I'm making chocolate cakes and buying sugar from you, and buying cocoa from you, and buying whatever, wheat, flour from you, and so on. That kind of thing. Only 30% or so, maybe even less of all transactions are just you go to the store and you buy something that you use. So that tells you that market prices are not only mechanisms through which we exchange consumer goods directly, we obtain consumer goods. They're also the mechanism through which decisions how something is going to be made are made. Those 70% of all market transactions are decisions of producers. How much steel to use, how much steel to buy, how much sugar to buy, how many workers to hire. 12, 15, 20, 1, 0. How many machines, which type of machine, how much to use a machine, 12 hours, 8 hours, 7 hours, and so on. All those decisions are made based on market prices. Okay, now, what is the function of market prices? Can you tell me? In general, what is the use of market prices?
To describe the value of a product?
To describe the value of a product. That's a pretty good definition. Not quite precise, but very good. So proposal is to describe the value of a product. Can you describe for us the meaning of this term, describe? Let us analyze it a little bit more. You're correct, but it's not quite sufficient level of concreteness here. And market prices tell us something very important about the value of the product. What is that? What if price of something is higher? What does that tell us about the value? Is greater value. Okay, so price is correlated with value. Or we can say with scarcity. So this is the key in modern economics. Value and scarcity are closely connected. In modern economics, usually the way how economic science is defined as a science of how individuals in society manage scarce resources or make decisions about the use of scarce resources. And then market prices are indicators of how scarce something is. If price is higher, something is scarcer. If the price is lower, it's less scarce. If the price is zero, what do we call that good? The price of which is zero. It's pretty good. So contrary to, or what is it called, the opposite of scarcity, of scarce good, is a free good. So air is a cost of free good. You don't have to pay anything for free. What is the difference? Why do you have to pay something for aluminum and steel and coffee, and you don't have to pay anything for air? All of them are equally useful. Naturally. Yeah, but crude oil is also natural good that you have to pay for it. Gasoline is based on nature. Land is natural. You have to pay a price to acquire.
Because there's no limited amount of it. There's no limited amount of it.
Yeah, the amount of it. So air, what determines scarcity is a relationship between the available supply, available stock of that good, and our needs for it. So what makes air a free good is the fact that it exists in such an abundance that all of us can consume as much as we want without affecting the ability of other people to consume as much as they want. In most settings, in most situations. So a free good is a good that could be consumed in unlimited, in every quantity that individual sees fit, without negatively affecting the ability of other people to do so. So scarcity or freeness of a good is determined by the relationship between the relevant unit of our consumption of that good and the total available supply, total available stock. So scarce goods are those goods that do not exist in unlimited quantities, or that exist in such quantities that makes our consumption of it rigorous. Which means one more unit consumed by me is 1 unit less for you. So aluminum, there is like a 300,000 tons of aluminum. And there are business projects now that demand maybe 3 million tons of aluminum. So that means that there is more than one use for aluminum, and that we as society have to make choices which among those potential uses of aluminum are going to be sacrificed. Something is scarce means that we have to make decisions about our consumer needs for it. Our needs for it are far greater than the available stock, available supply. Okay, so scarce goods existing in limited quantities vis-a-vis our consumption needs. So you have to bear in mind here that scarcity is not just a description of how much of something there is. It's a description of the relationship between how much we need it and how much of it exists. There could be a very low quantity of something, and that something might not be scarce at all if our need for it is very low. And very few, let's say, horse and buggy or carriages in the United States right now. But they're not scarce because people drive cars and fly airplanes. The needs for carriages are very low. Or let's say typewriters. You know what is that? The old piece of equipment that when I was of your age, I was using still typewriter. So now the quantity of typewriters is a fraction of what it used to be 3 years ago. But the typewriters are not scarce. Why? Because nobody uses typewriters anymore. A few freaks or people who want to collect old items, that's the source of demand. Most people use the personal computers or laptops and so on. So then the fact that there is a very few typewriters in the world doesn't make them scarce, because the demand, the need for typewriters is very low. Okay, so scarce goods are those goods that do not exist in unlimited quantities with regard to our needs. Now, what we have to do if there is not enough of something that is useful, we have to figure out who is going to get what. So we don't have to worry about who is going to get oxygen in this hole. Because there is more than enough oxygen for everyone. But we have to worry who is going to get a laptop because there is only so much of them available, and not everybody who wants to have a laptop for free can get it. So laptops are scarce goods, aluminum is scarce good, even coffee is scarce good. We have to decide about how to ration or limit the use of that resource. Ration. Which means limiting. If we don't want to fight, we have to figure out some peaceful way of limiting who can use a given resource. So you can use, for example, prohibitions. Let's say only blue-eyed people in this room can have there's 3 chocolate cakes here, and everybody wants to have chocolate cakes. There is 22 or 23 of us. So one rationing mechanism would say only blue-eyed people, or only, for example, people of Slavic ancestry. Ha ha ha. That's only me, so I get all 3 chocolate cakes. So that would be one rationing mechanism. Or we can line up in the Welder library down there and then run here. 3 persons who arrive first get chocolate cake. That's called the first come, first served. That's a rationing mechanism. There is not enough for everybody, but we have some like a plausible, reasonable mechanism for rationing. Tallest. That's how I always come up with a criteria that somehow benefit me. Okay, the shortest. Only women. Only whatever. Men of Asian ethnicity, whatever. Okay, so first come, first serve, or some arbitrary criteria. So you exclude everybody who doesn't fit this arbitrary criteria. But is that the most efficient way of rationing use of resources? Probably not. What is the most widely used mechanism of rationing?
Whoever's willing to pay the most.
Prices. Market prices are the fundamental fundamental mechanism for rationing. How does that work? I'll give you one graph, which is the most important graph that you will ever see in economics. The horizontal axis is price. Oh, on the vertical axis is price. On the horizontal axis is the quantity of that good that will be bought. And this line here is called the demand curve. Demand curve is a mathematical function that connects together all points, all possible combinations of market prices of a given good, and the quantity of that good that will be bought by consumers at that particular price. So you see this mathematical function shows you that higher the price, lower the quantity that will be demanded. Price is very high here. The quantity will be low. If price drops, quantity will increase. There is an inverse relationship between the demand and price. So you can think of prices then as an information mechanism that tells you the information about the scarcity. If something gets scarcer, the price of that thing is going to increase. When price of something increases, consumption or use of that thing is going to drop, which will help then conserve this scarce resource. So that's the reason, for example, why we never run out of oil or other natural resources. Because market prices are very efficient in signaling relative scarcity of everything. So we're not likely to run out of oil anytime soon, because if oil became really scarce, that will result in a very quick increase in price of oil. So what's going to happen as a consequence of that? A couple of things will happen that will help preserve or conserve this scarce resource for the future. Say, distribute its use, its consumption over time better. Make people spend or consume less now or maybe more later on. So price increases, immediate consumption, immediate demand goes down. That means you conserve the resource. Less of it is consumed now, lower the likelihood that it will be exhausted very. What else will happen? Imagine if the price of gasoline increased 100% more and stayed at a very high level for 5 years. Price of crude oil increased 200% and stayed at that level for 3-5 years. Far less oil and all oil products will be consumed, of course. But what else will happen? Substitutes will show up. So once oil became very expensive, people will be motivated to search for alternatives that can satisfy the same needs that oil products satisfy right now. Alternative forms of energy like nuclear or solar or wind power may become much more attractive. The reason why alternative energy, renewables, so-called, are such an abysmal failure from an economic point of view right now is that oil is so cheap. We now know that oil is not going to run out, the price is very low. We know that oil reserves are huge and that we can access now, due to technology and fracking and everything, we can access a far larger reserves of oil and natural gas than we thought we could as late as 10 years ago. Now then, economic incentives and economic viability of alternative forms of energy are very low. That they're kept afloat only by political pressure. Economically, they cannot compete. They survive only because the government gives them subsidies and regulatory relief. It's harassing the fossil fuel industries. That's it. So see, in the long run, actually, the market prices serve not only to conserve the existing resources, but also to stimulate the production and use of alternative sources. So price rationing serves multiple purposes. So this is the connection between scarcity and prices. That market prices are a mechanism that allows us to not to overconsume, not to overuse, not to waste resources. That's the only mechanism so far discovered that allows us not to waste resources. So give you one example, maybe even an even better one than fossil fuels and renewables. You know which material is used for electrical wires, for electrical conduction? Most widely used.
Copper.
Copper. Yeah. You know which material is the best electrical conductor?
Rubber, is it? Or is it plastic?
No, plastic is an insulator. Copper is the second best. There is one which is even better, much better. And it is not used at all. Silver. Silver is a much better conductor than copper. So my question to you, why nobody uses silver for electrical wires?
More expensive,
Why is it more expensive?
harder to find.
Harder to find, scarcer. So imagine that we didn't have market prices and we wanted to satisfy all consumer needs as we satisfy them now. What engineers would do? Engineer is a person who technically optimizes the operation of the system. Find me the material that is the best conductor of electricity. They find silver. We dig out silver and use it for electrical production. We don't have market prices, we run out of silver in 2 years, 3 years. No more silver. Not only for electrical conduction, no more silver for rings, no more silver for money, no more silver for the component parts for laptops, for all other kinds of things that we use. Without market prices, we wouldn't be knowing what we are doing actually. Whether something is a scarce good or not, we have no clue in the absence of market prices. So now we are ready to put up with a slightly lower or significantly lower performance of our electrical conducting system for the greater good. Because we need silver for other purposes that are more important than this small increment in the efficiency of electrical conduction that we would have gotten if we replaced all electric copper wires with silver wires. And the only mechanism that allows us to do this very fine, very intelligent choice, market price, the silver is 10 times more expensive. We can Google it now, the commodity prices, how much more expensive per unit of weight silver is easily compared. Huge difference. Silver is a precious metal, they say, with platinum and gold. So people don't use. I got one dental implant, two dental implants made. They used to be made of gold. They're not made anymore. They now use ceramic or other metal, ceramic metal amalgamation, which is not always as good as gold, but good enough. So now we freed up the supply of gold that used to be utilized for dental crowns for something else, for some pieces of parts, component parts of technological devices, microchips, whatever they have used for savings. So market prices allow us to economize, to preserve and conserve resources, and to use them in the most efficient way. The market prices are signals that say, don't touch this. Stay away from silver. Oh, this is good. Take this. So now, think about it. In socialism, one of the problems with socialism is not only that you have a difficulty of motivating people to work. That's the most common counter-argument against socialism. In socialism, you don't have private property, and whatever you do, you don't benefit from successful business decisions that you make. That it's difficult to motivate people to make good business decisions if they're not going to benefit from good business decisions. And that's the most common counter-argument, or the most common argument for relative comparative superiority of capitalism to socialism. In capitalism, it's your choice, your cost, and your money. If you make a good decision, you're gonna get the profit, so you're motivated to work well. You're motivated to innovate, you're motivated to make a good product that consumers will want. But an even more important argument here is that in socialism, in which you abolish market prices, you have no way of telling whether something is a good or a bad business decision. How do you know, as a businessman in America, that some business decision was made or some production process was efficient? How do you know? You compare certain things. You compare your revenues with your cost. That's the simplest possible mechanism for making sense of some business, whether something is a lousy decision or a good decision. How you calculate revenues? Revenues from selling something product. Let's make it simple. You're producing chocolate cakes. And you're producing just one type of chocolate cake, which costs $5 a piece. So your revenue is the number, the quantity of chocolate cakes that you sell times the price. Price of chocolate. What are your costs? You see, a successful businessman has a profit, unsuccessful one has a loss. What is profit? What is the loss? That is the simplest definition. Profit is revenue minus cost, which is greater than zero. Your revenue is greater than your cost. So we've seen how you calculate the revenue. Quantity or volume of production times price. It's expressed in dollar terms, in monetary units. It's very important. What about costs? Let's say component parts, sugar, wheat, and cocoa or milk. Quantities of all these goods times their prices, plus wages for your workers. And you add up all of this, and you get the dollar sum. And then you compare the two numbers. And then if the number is a positive one, you made a good decision. Because you created something that is worth more than some total of the stuff that you waste, resources that you use to produce chocolate cakes. So then every objective observer can say this person improved the value of societal resources by creating something that is worth in monetary terms more than the stuff that he used up in the process. And vice versa. If the cost is greater than revenue, you wasted resources. You created something that is worth less than the sum total of stuff that you used up in the process. But you see, what is the precondition for this entire process of economic calculation that can help us make sense of whether a decision is a good or a bad one? Then you have a market prices for everything. Market prices for final consumer good that you sell, as well as market prices for the all component parts that you use in the production process. Only then you can say, you can make an objective estimate whether your business decision was a good one. If there are market prices for labor, market prices for sugar, market prices for milk, market prices for the machines that you use, market prices for electricity that you use, market prices for the space, whatever the office or factory space that you use, and everything else. If you don't have market prices for some of these components, the calculation is meaningless. You have no way of telling whether you made a good or a bad economic decision. You see how precious this is, how important market prices are. They're unpleasant, actually. They're symbols of limitations that we face in our life. Poverty, we don't have enough money. When you say, I don't have enough money, what you're saying, actually, I cannot obtain enough of everything that I want to have. And sometimes people harangue against money because they're angry at the fact that our life is limited and our economic possibilities are limited. They think somehow that the money is to blame. No, money is just an expression. Money is just a symbol of economic reality. Money is just a measuring stick. It's a measuring unit in which economic reality is expressed. Okay, the key thing here is scarcity is with us whether we allow market prices to work or not. A socialist central planner is facing scarcity as much as a businessman and entrepreneur. We cannot abolish scarcity unless we believe in Garden of Eden here on Earth. Most goods will be scarce because our needs, our wants, our uses for goods and services are always going to be greater than the available supply. There's 22 of us. We can do like 1,000 different things. We're gonna work on only 22. Every one of us maybe 24. Somebody works 2 jobs, they're gonna work. Okay. So scarcity is a fundamental fact of life, and you can deal with it only in 2 ways: by ignoring it at your peril, which is what socialists do, or dealing with it in the market system, trying to minimize and control it through the market price system. Any questions? Just one more definition that I want. I don't want to bury you too much with this general analysis. Just one more thing that is mentioned in your book. I didn't insist so much on it. One distinction here that was kind of implicit in everything that I said thus far is a distinction that all useful, all scarce goods could be divided up into 2 fundamental groups: consumer goods and producer goods. So consumer goods are those goods that have the capacity to satisfy our needs directly. Everything that could be used to satisfy our consumer needs directly is called consumer goods. Producer goods, or resources, as they are called in your book. Resources or producer goods. Those are useful goods that are not directly consumed, but are nevertheless useful because they contribute to the production of final consumer goods. There could be 3 or 4 different types of those. Human labor is a useful good. Why? Because we cannot eat or drink or use human labor in any direct way, but human labor is necessary to produce it. Without human labor, nothing gets done. So it's a good useful, which has commands a price in the market. The reason why human labor commands a price is not that people like to sacrifice it to pay somebody. It's because without human labor, nothing that people really want to consume the goods will be made. The second type of resources are natural resources. They're sometimes called land in the economic language. Land, that's the set of God-given or nature-given resources that you find that are necessary to produce. Crude oil, wood, water, pristine land is not touched. So everything from the natural environment that was not touched by human hand, that was not transformed by human labor. That's also a resource. Very few things, but silver or copper that we need for those are natural resources, or land in the economic sense, we call that land. Not to be confused with land in the colloquial sense, like agricultural land. And finally, capital goods. That's a third type of resources.
Would all natural resources be considered producer goods?
Yeah, that's a good question. Can you tell me? Are all natural resources producer goods? That's a very good question. What determines whether something is consumer good or producer, or whether something is a good at all? It's our subjective preferences. If we want to consume something, that's a consumer good. If you want to use something to make another consumer good, then that's a producer good. One and the same thing could be a producer and consumer good, depending where does it fit into our production schemes. So for example, bread. Is bread a consumer good or a producer good? Bread is a man-made, but nevertheless the principle is the same. Is bread a consumer good or a producer good? Well, yeah, depends. If you like to eat bread with other dishes, as I like, Eastern European habit is even eat bread with potato and meat. It's a consumer good. You eat it directly. But imagine that you want to make French fries, and not French fries. What is it called? French toast. I'm just translating in my head from Serbian. those is difficult. Not helping with those terms. So then bread is a producer good because you're going to use eggs and salt and cooking oil and the pain in order to make French toast. And then it's produced good. So it depends where in our production scheme it fits. Apple is usually, if you use apple to eat it, it's a consumer good. But if you use it to make an apple juice, then it's a producer good. And the same applies to whether something is a good at all. So why is crude oil? Is crude oil an economic good? What do you think? It is. People pay money for it to be used for something. What can be used for? To make gasoline. So now if you have crude oil on your land, the price of your land is going to increase, right? Because everybody wants to sell it. It's black gold. That's the term. It used to be a black waste. If you found crude oil on your land in Texas or something, the price of your land will go down. Right? It's just spoiling the land and makes it less valuable for agriculture. What changed in the meantime? We figured out a way to use crude oil for some intelligent purposes that we didn't know how to use 100 years ago. The internal combustion engine and many other inventions that made crude oil the same physical substance that used to be a waste, now is a useful economic good because we figured out a way to put it into some causal connection with satisfaction of our human needs. What is this causal connection? You can use it to make a gasoline and use gasoline to power automobiles and cars and airplanes. So even not only whether something is a producer or consumer good is determined by our subjective thoughts and our subjective preferences. Whether something is a good to begin with, economic good, or not, is determined by our subjective preferences. There is nothing objective, any chemical characteristic of a crude oil that makes it an economic good. It's only our ability to use it to satisfy our consumer need that makes it an economic good. And is crude oil a consumer good or a producer good? If you don't like to drink it, if it's not used directly, it's good. Is aluminum a producer good or consumer good? It's difficult to figure out a way at this point any direct consumer use for aluminum plates. Okay, to use them to produce something else. Okay. I have a feeling that I have something else to add, but probably. Okay. Any final questions? Is this too complicated and confusing? All these things. So just make sure scarcity, scarce goods, free goods, market prices, rationing, but these key terms keep in mind. Demand, and you will be fine. As we go along, we will be going back many times to most of these motifs, most of these things that I just threw at you today. They will come back. So what may look as a confusion and complication right now will be maybe useful later on. So other things might be clearer later. Okay, we have one more chapter on Thursday, and then will be the first homework assignment over the week. No more questions? Okay, see you all on Thursday.